ever get that feeling? Like the harder you work, the further away financial freedom seems.
It's a common feeling.
We're diving into a topic that's usually whispered about, in hushed tones, but impacts every single one of us. The system of money itself.
Right. Not the investing tips.
Exactly. Not budgeting hacks, but how this whole thing is structured and what that means for your wallet.
Zooming out to the bigger picture, that's where things get really fascinating.
So going full matrix here, choosing the red pill. What's our source material for this deep dive?
Okay, so we've got a thought-provoking documentary on the evolution of money.
Okay.
A recent poll from the Cobden Center that reveals some shocking public misconceptions.
Interesting.
And some insightful analysis from the Bank of England itself. No conspiracy theories here, just the facts.
All right, lay it on me. When I picture the money supply, I'm thinking stacks of cash, bank vaults, dramatic heist movie stuff.
Well, get ready for a plot twist. This documentary points out that back in 2010, a whopping 97.4% of the UK's £2.15 trillion money supply wasn't physical cash at all.
Really?
We're talking about commercial bank money, which essentially lives as digital entries in a database.
Hold up. So when people say the money supply, they mostly mean, what, IOUs with extra steps?
It's not that simple, but you're getting the idea. See, when commercial banks issue loans, they're not just moving existing money around like we tend to imagine.
Right.
They're actually creating new money electronically. And when those loans are repaid, that money essentially vanishes. Except for the interest, of course.
Okay, I know banks love their interest, but are you saying they have this money-creating power that most people don't even know about?
That's precisely what this documentary argues, and it's not some fringe theory. The Bank of England itself acknowledges this process of debt money creation.
Dead money. Catchy.
In fact, they've even published research on it.
But if this is all above board, why does it feel like such a big reveal?
Because it challenges a fundamental assumption most of us hold, that banks are just intermediaries between savers and borrowers. This Cobden Center poll we mentioned really highlights this disconnect. They found that only 30% of people understand that banks actually create new money when they lend.
Wow, only 30%.
Yeah.
So most people, like myself until a few minutes ago, are walking around with this completely different mental model of how money works.
Exactly. And that misunderstanding has real-world consequences. Think about all those times politicians preach about the importance of saving for a rainy day.
Right, sounds sensible.
But in this system, if everyone saved and no one borrowed, the money supply would shrink, potentially triggering a recession.
Wait, so you're telling me that my attempt to be financially responsible, to save more, could actually contribute to a downturn in the economy? That's counterintuitive, to say the least.
It seems paradoxical, but it's a fundamental consequence of how our debt-based system functions. It requires a constant flow of borrowing and lending to keep growing.
Okay, this is blowing my mind a little bit.
Yeah.
And here's another thing that's always bugged me. We've got all this incredible technology. Everything's supposed to be faster, cheaper, more efficient. So why does it feel like most of us are working longer and harder just to stay afloat?
That's a question a lot of people are asking, and it gets to the heart of this documentary's critique. In a debt-based system where new money is created primarily through loans, there's a constant flow of wealth towards those who hold the debt. In many cases, the financial sector.
So it's like this subtle undercurrent constantly pulling wealth in one direction. No wonder it feels like an uphill battle for so many people.
It's a perspective worth considering, and it raises some crucial questions about alternative ways to structure our financial system.
Well, if money is just a human invention, a system we created, surely we can rethink it. Imagine a world where the financial system actually works to distribute wealth more equitably.
You're hitting on a crucial point. Money is a human invention. It's not, like some immutable law of nature.
Right.
And throughout history, we've experimented with different forms, different systems.
Okay, so if we're talking about reshaping money, let's get some historical context.
Yeah.
This documentary mentioned something about the gold standard. How does that fit into all of this?
The gold standard. For centuries, many countries tied their currencies to a fixed amount of gold.
Right.
It had its flaws, but it provided a level of stability. You knew your money represented a tangible, finite resource.
Right, like actual shiny gold you could hold in your hand, not just numbers on a screen somewhere.
Exactly. And that tangibility, that connection to a physical asset, is something many people argue for even today. They see it as a way to curb inflation and bring more transparency to the system.
Because gold can't just be created out of thin air like our digital money.
Precisely. But then comes the 1970s, and the world shifts away from the gold standard, moving towards what we have now, fiat currency.
Fiat currency. Sounds fancy, but makes it different.
It essentially means our money is backed by the government's declaration of its value. We trust that a dollar is worth a dollar because the government tells us so.
So we went from gold coins to like a collective leap of faith.
In a nutshell. And as you can imagine, this shift had profound implications. It allowed for a rapid expansion of the money supply, especially with commercial banks now able to create money electronically.
And that takes us back to our earlier discussion about debt money and the potential downsides of this system.
Exactly, and it's not just about the amount of money being created, it's also about where that money flows. The documentary highlights how, in recent decades, a significant portion of this newly created money has been funneled into assets like real estate.
The housing market.
Yeah.
It feels like everyone's always talking about rising house prices.
Right, and this documentary argues that this focus on inflating housing prices can create a sort of illusion of wealth. Sure, your house might be worth more on paper, but is it really creating genuine prosperity?
Especially when everyone's struggling to afford a place to live. It's like that game we talked about earlier. The rules seem rigged to benefit a select few.
That's a key argument they make, that this system, with its emphasis on debt and asset inflation, can exacerbate wealth inequality. And it's not just about housing either. They go into detail about other financial instruments. Things with intimidating names like credit default swaps and securitization.
Okay, pause for a second. Those terms sound a bit like a foreign language to me.
Yeah.
And probably to a lot of our listeners. Can you break them down for us?
Absolutely. Imagine a card game.
Okay.
Securitization is like taking a bunch of individual loans, mortgages, car loans, whatever, bundling them together into a single hand. Then, Wall Street chops up that hand into smaller pieces like chips and sells them off as investments.
So it's like turning debt into a tradable commodity.
Exactly. And credit default swaps, those are like side bets on those debt bundles. You're essentially betting on whether those bundles will succeed or fail.
Sounds risky.
It can be. And that's the point this documentary emphasizes. All these complex financial instruments were supposed to manage risk, but often they ended up amplifying it. And when things go wrong on that scale,
We get a financial crisis, like in 2008.
precisely, the system becomes so complex, so interconnected, that even experts have trouble grasping all the potential consequences.
So we've got a system that's arguably unstable, benefits a select few. Are we just stuck with it? Is there another way to play this game of money?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? This documentary argues that we need to at least consider alternative systems, ones that prioritize stability, fairness, and the long-term well-being of society.
All right, I'm ready for some radical ideas. What are some of the alternatives this documentary explores? Some radical ideas. Okay, lay 'em on me. What are some of these alternative systems?
Well, one of the most intriguing ideas is backing currencies with something tangible again. But instead of gold, they propose energy.
Energy-backed currency. So instead of like pegging the value of money to how much gold a country has stashed away, we link it to something like, what? Oil barrels, kilowatt hours.
Precisely. Think about it. Energy is essential to pretty much every aspect of modern life, and it could provide a more stable, transparent foundation for a currency compared to, say, the whims of the stock market.
And it's not like we're going to run out of energy needs anytime soon.
Exactly. Plus, proponents argue that tying a currency's value to energy could actually incentivize investment in renewable resources, shifting us away from fossil fuels.
Okay, that's an interesting twist. Making sustainability profitable on a fundamental level. What else?
Another option is moving away from single currency systems altogether and embracing a basket approach. Imagine a world where instead of us using dollars or euros, we have a global system based on a basket of currencies, commodities, or even specific resources.
So it's like diversifying your portfolio, but on a global scale, spreading the risk, and maybe leveling the playing field a bit.
Exactly. It could potentially create a more stable, resilient system, less prone to manipulation by any single nation or institution.
Okay, these alternatives sound intriguing on paper, but let's be real. How feasible is it to actually implement such radical changes? I imagine there'd be some serious pushback.
You're absolutely right. Any significant shift in the monetary system would face Massive obstacles. We're talking about powerful interests who benefit from the current system. They wouldn't relinquish their control easily.
Right, it's like trying to change the engine of a car while it's still running at full speed.
A pretty apt analogy. It would require a tremendous amount of
Okay.
global cooperation, political will, public support to even attempt such a transformation.
So it's not just about coming up with better ideas, it's about navigating the complex web of power dynamics, vested interests that maintain the status quo.
Exactly. And that's where this documentary leaves us, with a sense of both urgency and, I'd say, cautious optimism. We need to have these conversations, explore these alternatives, but we also need to be aware of the challenges involved in enacting real change.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed by all of this, to be honest. But here's the key takeaway for our listeners. Understanding the money system, even just a little bit, can be incredibly empowering.
Absolutely. The more we understand how the system works, the better equipped we are to navigate it, to make informed decisions, and to advocate for change.
It's like finally getting a look behind the curtain at the wizard pulling the levers. It might be a bit daunting, but it also demystifies things and gives us a sense of agency.
It reminds us that these systems are human-made, and as such, they can be changed.
So to our listeners, don't let this deep dive be a one-time thing. Keep researching, keep asking questions, keep those conversations going. Because the future of money, like the future itself, is yet to be written.